Howdy folks, this is Deacon Parsons, and the topic of today's video is same-sex marriage. Now I hadn't planned on doing one on this topic for a lot of reasons. First of all, normally my opinion on this topic just ends up making everybody mad. And secondly, you'd think that as much stuff has been said about this, that everything that could be said has been said. But oddly enough, I've found a few topics that are not getting any play in the media that I think are important, that need to be said. And, well, let's saddle up and see if we can make it to the end of this, find a little common sense, a little common ground, and just for fun, see if you can make it all the way to the end of this video without me making you mad and you turning me off. Point number one. As this is recorded, the Supreme Court has heard two landmark cases on the same-sex issue. Now, the one case that I think there's something very important about that nobody's talking about is Proposition 8 out of California. To give you a little background on this case, the people of the state of California got together, put a ballot initiative on the ballot, and they made same-sex marriage illegal in the state of California. The proponents of same-sex marriage took the will of the voters to the Supreme Court of the state of California, and they had the justices throw it out. They threw out the election. Then the people of California got together and they put another ballot initiative on the ballot, and that was to make same-sex marriage unconstitutional in California. That was Proposition 8. Now the same-sex marriage proponents are arguing in front of the Supreme Court, trying to get the Supreme Court of the United States to throw out that election. This is a much larger deal than anybody's really talking about in the media. If a law is thrown out because it's unconstitutional, then we the people get together and we amend the Constitution, which is no small feat. Why is there still any argument? How many times do we the people have to win an election? Now let me ask that again, because it's real important that we capture this concept. If the Supreme Court of the United States does not force the government of California to obey the Constitution of California that the people of California have duly enacted, do we really have the rule of constitutional law? Well, the answer, of course, is no. If the Supreme Court does not make the government of California obey the Constitution of California, the rule of law is gone. And this is a huge problem. Now, before somebody gets bent out of shape, we need to say the people of California did not amend their Constitution to make black people slaves again. They did not amend their Constitution to take the vote away from women. They amended their Constitution to keep marriage the way it has always been in the United States and in Western culture for hundreds, if not thousands of years. If the Supreme Court of the United States does not uphold the California Constitution, what recourse do the people of California have left? Before you answer that question, remember that there are people in California, soldiers, sailors, airmen, policemen, who have given their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If even amending the state constitution cannot protect the people of California, what recourse do they have? Well, the answer is very sobering. When the ballot box fails, all we're left with is bullets. This actually has a potential of becoming a shooting civil war. Okay, the second point. The same-sex marriage crowd likes to frame this as a civil rights issue. Now, getting married isn't actually a right, it's a privilege, but I'll get to that point later. But at best, what we're talking about here, if getting married is a right, it's an unenumerated right, not covered, specifically mentioned in the Bill of Rights. Let's start with looking at how these people react to specifically enumerated rights in the Constitution, things that are right there, there's no misunderstanding about them at all. Let's look first at the Second Amendment. By and large, the same people who are proposing same-sex marriage are the same people who are trying to destroy everyone's Second Amendment right by hook or by crook. If an unenumerated right is so important and so sacrosanct, why can't they respect a specifically enumerated right? If these people can't be bothered to support a specifically enumerated right that they disagree with or they don't want to participate in, then what moral authority do they have to try to force people who don't want to participate or agree with their unenumerated right to try to force it on them? How about the First Amendment right to free speech? By and large, these same groups of folks that are proposing the same-sex marriage are the same people that are writing the speech codes for the colleges and protest and use brown shirt tactics to not allow people they disagree with to speak on campus. The same people are quick to take offense and demand apologies from people who offend them. But when they offend someone else with their speech, they chalk it up and say, well, it's freedom of speech, and if it offends you, that's just tough on you. Again, if the people who demand this right cannot be bothered to protect the rights of others that they disagree with, what moral authority do they have to demand that the right they're trying to put out be respected by people who don't agree with it? Then we come to the First Amendment right of freedom of religion. Now, the three largest religions on the planet, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, all believe that same-sex relationships are sinful. And they have the moral, legal, ethical, and constitutional right to hold that belief, to believe it, to act upon it, and to vote their conscience. Do proponents of same-sex marriage acknowledge and support this religious freedom, this constitutional right? Well, not in the least. They go so far as to send people into religious services to disrupt them. They demand and do everything they can to force other people to not freely practice their religion. They go so far as persecuting the Boy Scouts of America, who have a Supreme Court decision that says they have the right to freely associate. The Supreme Court says that the Boy Scouts of America has a constitutional right to not have gay people in their organization because it's part of their bylaws. It's part of the Boy Scouts of America culture. Do these people respect that? No. Right now, the state of California is trying to get the Boy Scouts of America to have their tax-exempt status removed. They do everything they can to get the BSA kicked out of venues and denied the use of facilities that anybody else can use. And in states where same-sex marriage is already passed, people like florists and bakeries and those who don't want to support same-sex marriage get sued because they don't want to do business. They don't want that business. So we don't see a lot of respect for other people's rights coming out of this crowd. This rank hypocrisy from the proponents of same-sex marriage not only undercuts any moral high ground claim that they have, but it actually earns them the enmity of people who are not really into the religious and moral aspect of it, but are just really put off by the childish way that some of these groups demand rights for themselves but won't respect anyone else's right. And now we come to the third point. Whether or not marriage is a religious institution or a government institution is, in my opinion, pretty much a moot point. In the U.S., it is a combination. That's how we inherited it. It's part of our culture. However it got to this point, it exists because at one time it served the needs of individuals and society reasonably well, and it's done it for quite a while. Now, anybody in the United States can stand up and say, I want to change the definition of family in the United States. That's freedom in America. You can do that. But everybody else has the same right to stand up and say, no, you know what, I kind of like things the way they are, I don't think we're going to make the change. As anybody with any formal debate training knows, that for your debate to prevail, to change something, the burden of proof that the change is a good thing lies with the affirmative. If same-sex marriage proponents are to legitimately prevail, they have to provide everyone a good reason why this change is a good thing. If they militantly force this on other people are going to militantly resist. Fellow citizens may owe tolerance, but they don't owe acceptance. The illegitimate course taken by the same-sex marriage crowd is one taken on a lot of topics, is they claim that it's a right, and then they run around saying, my rights are being violated, my rights are being violated. This is unmitigated male bovine excrement. Nobody has a right to get married. Not heterosexuals, not homosexuals, nobody. There are a multitude of laws and restrictions placed on who can and cannot get legally married. Most states have laws against certain close relatives getting married. Other states have laws about age or parental consent. Some states require blood tests and will not allow people with certain diseases to get married. Not to mention that someone can't get married if they're already legally married to someone else. If getting married to quote-unquote someone you love is a right, it's a constitutional right, how can we justify making any marriage illegal? Okay, now let's be clear. Consenting adults having sex with consenting adults is a human right. And none but the most fanatic of religious people will tell you that they want the government regulating who can have sex with whom, because that's far too much government intrusion for almost anybody. However, registering one's sexual partners with the government for the purpose of obtaining benefits is not a right. To get a benefit from the government or to have benefits protected by the government, a person has to do something that benefits the government. If you want a pension, a police pension, fire pension, military pension, you have to serve in your respective government area for a certain amount of time with a certain level of expertise before you earn your pension. Government's only real stake in marriage is basically to decide who gets your stuff when you're dead, which children are legitimately yours that have a claim to your estate. Secondarily, the government's stake in marriage with the children is to provide stability so that the children are raised to become good, responsible, productive members of society. Every study that's looked into the matter will tell you that children that are raised with a mother and a father have better prospects, they have fewer detriments, fewer alcohol and drug problems, fewer poverty problems, and fewer problems all along when they are raised with their mother and their father. In short, there are real, actuarially verifiable reasons for the government to support a mother and a father with their children, for the government to give benefits, to give preferential treatment to those couples that raise their children together, because according to the actuarial tables, those children will be better citizens and will use less government funding for criminals, for drug and alcohol, for poverty. It may be obvious, but let's go ahead and state it. Same-sex couples will not produce their own children. They may get children from somewhere else. They may end up raising children, but they themselves will not be producing any offspring. The topic at hand centers on people wanting to change centuries of law and tradition and register their sexual partners with the government for the purposes of benefits. It is not out of line to ask them to explain to the rest of us how this change is going to benefit society as a whole. We know how it's going to benefit you, but what does the society and the rest of us get out of the proposition? Since by definition, this same-sex marriage relationship is not going to be producing any more soldiers or taxpayers of any kind, what benefit do they bring that the government should be giving them this preferential treatment? The proponents of same-sex marriage really need to quit yelling about this made-up right and win the debate. They need to explain to the majority of us, okay, you want gravy from the government, what are you going to do to earn your gravy? Since marriage is not a right, it's a privilege, and since it's such a huge change to society, it is incumbent on the proponents of same-sex marriage to quit yelling about their rights, quit being militant, and sit down and discuss how this is going to make the world a better place. Isaac Newton said, "For every action there is an equal but opposite reaction." The unwillingness of same-sex marriage proponents to respect constitutional law, their rank hypocrisy in demanding from others what they refuse to give to others, and the lame Saul Alinsky big lie tactics they're using to force their issues and on others guarantees the enmity of their fellow citizens. If and when the proponents of same-sex marriage begin acting like reasonable adults about the matter, reasonable adults will listen. This is Deacon Parsons saying, love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.